So hello everybody, I am Matt Curran and we are here for chapter 3 and it is changing the river flow, enhanced communication with Patty Moeller. Patty, I'm so excited that we're here. How are you doing today?
Good morning. It's good to see everybody. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for having us.
That we have. Can you believe it? It's growing.
I know.
It's getting bigger. There's more people on and this is just exciting. So why don't we do this real quick? Patty, you just take over and you see everybody on the screen and just have everybody real briefly, quickly introduce themselves.
Yeah, I don't even have to do that. Matt just asked you to. So do that, first names and tell us where you are because it's really fun to see that there's people all over.
I'm Anthony McCauley. I'm in the great state of North Carolina, obviously in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Nice.
Yes, I'm Anthony McCauley. I'm in the Pinehurst, North Carolina area.
I'm Amy Boggs. I'm in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. Our beaches are opening fully on Monday. Yippee.
Nice.
Do not tell my family that. They'll be at your house. They'll be ready to go. Including
and they will want to.
Just ask Patty.
Yeah.
I'm Judy Hicks, and I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, where our beaches are going to be open full on Monday also. Very excited.
I'm Megan. I'm in Chapel Hill studying for finals right now.
Any beaches open there, Megan?
Unfortunately not.
I'm Lindy. I live just down the street from Anthony in Southern Pines, North Carolina.
Nice.
I think you're muted, Ellen.
There you go.
Oh, we're playing back and forth. So I'm Ellen, Jacksonville, Florida. I didn't realize the beaches were fully opening. Does that mean we can lay out now instead of just exercising on them? Oh,
Only walk and
Within
fish, but
6 feet.
you can't go down there and relax.
well, then I'll just stay in my backyard.
You can surf.
I'm Alex
fish.
Tani in Austin, Texas.
Nice.
No beaches anywhere to be seen here.
That's awesome. All right, well, let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Go ahead and Patty, I'm Matt Kern, by the way, and Patty Moeller, we've been here every week. So, but we're just getting going on this chapter. This is, I will say this is, like you've already said in our pre-talk when we were talking earlier, to me, this is one of the best chapters that you have. When you're talking about communication, you're talking about being a counselor, talking about being a parent, talking about being a spouse, talking about being a brother or sister, whatever it is, a friend. This is where it all lies. You have to be able to communicate. So take it away, Patty. Talk about it just real quick, and then let's get going.
Yeah, I think, out of all the chapters, this is probably one that I'm the most passionate about. I think this is just everything to me. It's about how you communicate. It's about how we listen. As I looked back over it myself, I was kind of surprised that it was as small as it was because I am so passionate about that. But I think that we hit all 3 topics, which I hope we talk about today. I'm just going to look at the book. It's to begin your sentences with I rather than you. We'll talk about why that's so important. No advice giving. That's a key one. That is one that I think people struggle with all the time because as human beings, we want to help others. And that's the very last thing that anybody wants to hear. We want to be seen, heard, and validated. So, it doesn't matter to me where the panel wants to roam on this one. Anthony, I thought you had a great conversation piece when we were doing, like Matt said, the pre-talk. I'd love it if you would jump out there and kind of tell us what you said in the pre-talk.
Yes, I was letting the group right before the pre-talk. We're pre-talking in chapter 3, the enhanced communication. And I deal with teens across the state. And but when I have my group of boys, I'm always with them and I'm always telling them, you have got to get your grades together. You guys have got to do this. You've got to do that. Well, you know what? I think I need to take a step back. Well, I don't think I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to implement I statements and put it back on me and try to do something different because the group that I deal with, they call them at risk, but I call them at purpose. So I'm going to make more of a purpose to them and put some of it on me and try to, and psychotherapy, I'm not a therapist, but I would, coaching wise, Lindy knows this, in the coaching training, I'm going to put it back on me. I think it's going to be
Yep.
important for me to start using I statements. And I think it's going to make a big difference. I can't wait to implement it. So that's what we were talking about in the pre-talks.
Okay.
You know,
Anyone
I
else?
just, yeah, I just want to add, I do youth mental health first aid training several times a week. And that's one of the biggest things we focus on is using those I statements to just start that conversation. Hey, I'm concerned about you. I'm worried about you.
Yeah.
And honestly, that really opens up that communication. And, you know, I'm in school for social work. So of course I'm learning these different strategies, but it's all really just good communication skills, you know, being able to listen and, you know, restate what people are saying and
Yeah.
really focusing and not worrying about what your response is going to be.
Because it's such a difference when you say, I have a concern for you versus you look really tired or sick today. You look that, you know, that there's, as soon as you hear the word you, we know that empirically we know there are videos after videos after videos of people. I wish I could stand up, but when you hear the word you, we take a natural stance of either cocking a hip or putting one foot back. And it's almost like you go like this. You know, you're prepared for it. It feels like you're going to the principal's office. And then you're just like all of a sudden in your head. But when you hear the word I, it just alleviates all that.
I would say also, I read the chapter twice because I'm really enjoying the book. But when you were talking about that, when someone says you, I felt like I was 4 years old again.
Yes.
And I think that's what it does. If you have anything going on inside of you, it really does. It makes you so defensive. And so I'm gonna. That book was written for me, Patty. Thank you, by the way.
Thank you, Judy.
One of the things that I notice that is always kind of in the forefront of my mind when I'm speaking to somebody, asking questions, because Anthony mentioned in coaching, it's a lot of questioning. And so sometimes when you start going down that path of asking those questions, someone can feel in the spotlight and maybe start to feel highlighted or criticized by kind of feeling that it's all about them and not about you. So the I statements can help soften that approach and questioning instead of asking, what do you feel? You know, what do you think? How do you think you can change, you know, this behavior? How do you think you can respond differently next time in a conversation? It really puts all the expectation on the other person when you're really trying to help. So switching that statement and coming from a place of I'm concerned.
Yeah.
How can I help you change this behavior? How can I help you achieve a different result? And then it gets them to open up, because it's almost like the responsibility is taken within instead of placed on the other person to figure something out.
Alex. Oh.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've actually implemented it in my own life in almost a dumbed down sense, and taken, rather than not starting sentences with you and starting them with I've found that when you can combine those two things, it's outstanding. If you can just simply not start sentences with you, there's infinite other ways to start sentences. And if you're not starting with you, you're already ahead of the game. So, you know, you can kind of take that and even make it simpler to where you just make it exclusive of, hey, if you're trying to have a constructive conversation with somebody, or you're trying to give advice, or, you know, you're trying to assist, and you don't start with you, you're 5 steps ahead of wherever you were going to be if you did. And so I've tried to make it even more simple in my life, where I don't want to overanalyze and try to come up with an I statement if it's not necessary, where if I can just simply not start with you, I'm already ahead with whoever's receiving my comment than I would be otherwise. What
a great perspective. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'll throw another thing out there too. I mean, the you and the I, but also the why. If you go on and you say, you know, hey, why did you, and you immediately people go on the defensive. That's another word when you're asking somebody
A judgment question.
a judgment question, the why question, they immediately stop. So it's almost like when you say you put them in on the defense, so that's just one of the things that I've learned over time is just, how you start the sentence, just like you said, Alex, how you go after the sentence and how you, just start the conversation really is important. And, it's okay to use the why depending on how you use it. But if you're asking somebody, hey, why did you do this? Then they're automatically, like you said, that same defense mechanism kicks in and they want to stop and think of how they can defend themselves before they just open up to you, kind of like what Lindy was talking about as well.
And one of the things I like too about what Alex pointed out is when we have to take out a you statement or think about how to start, we have to slow down. If you take out the you statements, because that's how we normally speak. I mean, that's just the way humans are. So we go quickly and say, well, you should do, or you, it's just fast. So when we stop to think, like Alex said, what other way can I start this sentence? What other way other than you, any other way? We have to take that deep breath and go and be formulating in our head, which often stops us from saying really not such great things at certain times, especially if you're in a deeper, heavier conversation.
And Patty, I'd like to ask you to expand a little bit on the shame part of it. That's a word that kind of surprised me in the book, but as I read it, I thought, well, this really makes sense. But how does all of that kind of happen? Is it just something that is consistent over a period of time if you hear those as a child a lot? Or I was just kind of surprised by that. It makes sense. I was just kind of surprised by that word.
Are you talking about the should word, creating that makes
shame? Where you talked about finger pointing and all of that. I guess I hadn't considered shame as a part of it, but it is.
It all started innocently with any parent that was out there that said, you should get better grades, you should go make your room, you should go outside. And often, as Anthony pointed out, it came with the finger. You should do this. The young man that's on here can probably attest that I was guilty of that. And that's okay, because that's, the way we learn things. Shame comes from really the should word. You should go to your room. You should get better grades. The should word is the real shame word in here, because when we hear the word should, it automatically makes us feel like we're not good enough. And so when we say, I should go over there, it's just telling us that we're not doing it right. I should do more meditation. That means I'm a terrible person because I didn't wake up and meditate this morning. That's the sense that it creates. It's an internal dialogue that our brain automatically goes to, and the combination of we automatically feel like we're in trouble, then followed by should, it automatically tells our brains that we're not good enough. And if you have any kind of internal issue with esteem or any of those things, feeling good about yourself, feeling worthy, the you should combination just automatically takes you back to, I'm not good enough. And so when we have a whole list of things, I should go to the grocery store, I should meditate more, I should exercise more, I should make love more, I should be a better friend. That internal dialogue just keeps us saying, I'm just not good enough. And so just simple changes like, oh, I wish I had remembered to go get the milk, or I hope I go and practice meditation tomorrow, gives us a sense of freedom that we still have a chance and we can still be really, really good people. It's the shame. Should is a shame word. And if we can get rid of that, it's the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. So it keeps you in a place that you're never living up to your own expectations, let alone somebody else's.
So that
did that help, Judy?
Well, yeah, it's making me think about self-talk and how many times a day we're saying things that we don't realize that we're really saying, and they're actually harmful to us.
I tell people, we say 30, I'll get you in a second, Amy.
No worries.
We say 30,000 negative messages to ourselves a day. 30,000 people without even knowing it. So if we can interrupt that, I talked to somebody yesterday on the phone, and within 30 seconds, there were 8 times that person had referred to them as stupid or an idiot. And we're working on self-talk, and it's like, I'm such an idiot that I didn't do this. And oh, what an idiot. Because I said, I finally stopped. I said, I've been ticking how many times you've called yourself an idiot in less than a minute. So it is about that self-talk. Amy, what were you going to say?
Well, I even hesitate to say it. It's a little bit funny, but I've always heard to quit shoulding yourself.
Shoulding, yeah.
And yeah, so it's and the should and could, I think could even gives a little glimmer of hope, because then it's like with should, it's like you've fallen short of whatever the opportunity was, but could makes it like, okay, I could, and it's not putting the guilt or the shame doesn't seem to be rising to the top, and it's a choice, and therefore showing yourself hope that, hey, you can do this. But yeah, the self-talk is so, oh my goodness, so key, and because we hear everything we say.
Yeah, and later on in the book, I go through a shame exercise about, and it is about how you put, I should versus I could if I really wanted to. So there's one that just puts you down. So as we get further in the book, there are some exercises on how to get past that whole shame piece and learn how to be self-compassionate towards ourselves and to move things off of the should list, which keeps us locked in shame. One of the great stories that I have is that I worked with a gentleman and he owned a $5 billion company. And he talked about how he should have gone to school. And I said, but do you really want to? And he was like, no. And I said, whose dream is that? And he said, oh my God, it's my father's. And I said, does he know you own a multi-billion-dollar company? And he's like, yeah, I just know that that's what he had wanted for me. And so they went back and had a talk about it. And that was one of the main reasons that young man, he was in his 40s, but that was one reason that man did drugs and drank, is he felt so horribly guilty and shameful for not doing a should. And yet the should was irrelevant.
That's a heavy.
He was successful.
Oh my God, it's amazing that you just said that, Patty. Oh my goodness, that was, and you know my personal story because I walked in that for a long time. And even now I deal with it. I don't deal with it now because I'm the CEO of a company. And sometimes I go back and say, I should have got my degree, even though I'm 25 hours away. I should have. But you know what? That wasn't, I don't know. That was very profound what you just said. That was me. Oh my goodness. Chapter 3 is highlighted so much right now. And I couldn't even get to page 33. And I'm like Judy, I had to keep going back, but I found myself in a state of repentance immediately when I picked up Enhanced Communication chapter.
That's powerful.
That's very good, Anthony.
So,
Anthony's talking.
yeah, I want to hear from Megan. She's the only one we haven't heard from. Putting her on the spot.
Oh, Eugene's over there kind of being quiet.
This is kind of shifting a little bit, but even shifting the word should into the active listening parts. So I live with 8 girls in an apartment, just to give you a little context, 8 very opinionated voices, and 8 girls who are very willing to share any problems that they have. I love them to death, but it's the truth. So the minute that they have something, it can be the smallest thing. It is 7 other voices. I think you should do this. I think you should do this. Nobody takes 2 seconds to even think about the actual problem. And I'd heard the way you phrased this before about active listening, and I've tried to implement it, and it really does take a conscious effort to sit there and say, well, will you tell me more about this? Than say, well, if I were in your position, I would do X, Y, and Z. It's definitely difficult to do. And I think it's just our human nature to want to give advice and to want somebody to value our opinion. But in all actuality, you're completely right. They already know what they want to do. They just need somebody to listen to them so they can navigate that and find what they want to do before they actually do it and don't even take your advice in the end.
Yeah, anyone else? Because I have a lot. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the word should also plays into that. I think you should. And then it almost does instill that piece of shame if they don't do it. They're like, well, Megan thought I should do this and I didn't. So what I did was wrong. Is kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. Active listening. And I just say this. I mean, I think we talk about it all the time with Megan and our family is learning how to listen is the hardest thing. And I know we'll get there and I know you'll talk more about that, Patty, but it's listening is one of the hardest things to do because everybody wants to just jump and give their advice. Everybody wants to just say, well, I would do this and you should do that. And I did it this way. So that's the way you have to do it. And I know I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that as we move along.
Hey, I would just simply, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I would just simply add when I read the chapter, I immediately went to a marital relationship, and I know that when I first started dating my wife, one of the things that she liked about me, other than my regal good looks, was that I was a good listener, and she always used to say that, hey, you're really a good listener. And so I know over the years, I have not been as good of a listener as I used to be. So, framing things in the correct way, speaking to her in the correct fashion, especially if there's a disagreement. So staying away from the shoulds and, really communicating well, because those are the things, it's the communication or lack thereof. And the finances are typically what leads to divorces. So,
yeah,
the chapter is, it's an important one.
Yeah. Alex? He's just looking at me.
I didn't have anything to add.
Oh, okay. I thought you did. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, I think interesting. Yesterday I was talking to somebody and I think when you learn how to do that language, it is really powerful that it does work in marital situations. But I also see that this is so important in business. When people use this, and all of you on this panel are in business, and I think when people use this language in their business setting, it's also equally powerful. I think one of the things that I love doing is going into organizations and businesses and talking about this. There's two very different ways of somebody walking into their boss's office and the boss looking at them and saying, "You're late again on the report. Your department's a mess and you guys got to get your act together." And that's like, wow, I'm going to defend that to the end. If we can get that boss to turn around and say, "Hey, Steve, I have a concern about what's happening. I'm curious, the data's been late and the reports have been late. Is there anything I can help you with? Because we're not making timelines and I'm on the block for that. And I have concern of what's going on." That employee might actually look at that boss and say, "Oh God, my mom was just put in hospice and I haven't been able to function right. And I know I'm behind, and man, we just changed the whole thing. We just made now, this is about relationships to me. About I and you is about relationships. And I don't care whether it's a business relationship and I don't care whether it's a personal relationship. Tuning in, we want to become people-centric and not business-centric. And when we change the dialogue, we're going to have relationships with our employees, with our families. And I feel so strongly about this because I think it will really engage people to become more intimate. And I don't mean that in a sexual way. I mean that on a deeper, more personal level, that we are truly intimate, even with our best friends. So that's where I feel on that.
Yeah, and I think too, even from a, the boss employee relationship, I think that's a great example. But even, a customer relationship,
Yes.
there's always things that are going to go wrong. And, I went through one actually really recently, and this person just called and it was you. And I'm sitting there, and my first reaction is I am writing a laundry list mentally of all the things that they did that contributed to the problem. And finally, there was a third person that was finally involved, and I just had to stop. And I was like, guys, we are getting nowhere if we're just going to point out who did what that contributed to how we got here. We're here. Let's figure out what we all need to do in order to get it to go in the right direction. And so, I've worked for somebody that did the things that you just said, and it is really frustrating. But also from a customer relationship standpoint, if you can, take the ownership off of whatever's happened, and put them at ease, they're a lot more willing to try and find a middle ground or resolution rather than just complain and whine about what's gone wrong to that point.
I love that.
It's great advice.
Patty, can I say something?
Yes, sorry.
You and I talk when we see each other walking the dogs, and we mentioned podcasts and things like that. But I was listening to an Oprah Super Soul not long ago, and she had Joel Osteen on. And I personally love Joel Osteen, but he has this book out there called I Am. And he took the audience through this exercise, and there were people that, this is going on and that's going on. They were pretty low points, and he just had them say I am, and then a word that describes them. And that just came to my mind that it's very powerful. If you can, I've made a list in my journal just because I forget, but it's kind of becoming very, very clear that this has very deep roots, and it's going to take practice. I had to practice this morning with my husband, who was kind enough to walk the dog so I could get ready to be on this call. And
I didn't come get Riley.
It's such I think saying the word you is so natural to us because of the person and the conversation and the relationship that we have. But I think it can be very destructive if you're not careful. I know.
And I love the I am, and I'll tell you an exercise. I don't remember, to be honest, if it's in the book, but I do, as a lot of you know, work with human traffickers. And my very first experience was to prepare a young woman to do testimony in court about one of the largest kingpins that had been caught on the East Coast. And we were trying to put him away for life, and it was an amazing experience. And so as I'm working with this young girl, and it was just to make her testimony, and the FBI agents kept saying to me, Patty, where's the testimony? Like, how's it going? And I was like, I don't know. She won't tell me. And weeks before, I had asked her who she is. And I said, who are you? Like, tell me about you. And she said, I'm a prostitute. And I wrote on a piece of paper, I am, and I handed it to her. And I said, fill this out, however you want to fill this out. And we'll discuss it next week. And so she came back the next week, and she's very artistic, by the way. And she had this paper just with everything. And I was just amazed. And I said, would you read this to me? And she did. And she hadn't read it back to herself. And she sobbed. She literally just sobbed. And so we got closer to the court date. And again, FBI and attorneys are asking me, and she won't tell me what she's going to say in court. We are in court, and the judge asked to hear her story. And she looked at I get shivers every time I hear and tell this story. She looked at the guy, and she said, to you, I am a prostitute. She unfolded this paper. She looked at the judge, and she said, to you, I'm a mother. I'm a daughter. I'm a woman. I'm a tennis player. I'm a lover. I'm kind. I'm serious. I'm an addict. I'm a druggie. I'm sweet. I'm loving. there was not a dry eye in that house. And I have to tell you that I was also brought back to this woman's home one day and walked in, and in her living room, she had taken this, probably much larger than this photo behind me, and she had it put up in her living room. So, and it was a living document, because every time she did something new, she put it on there. Rollerblader. She'd looked at me and went, I went once. And I said, okay, but you did it. And to me, that's the greatest story of who I am, because we aren't just one person. She's not a prostitute. She's a gazillion things. And that was a powerful moment. So I love the I am, Judy. That's such a beautiful one. I want to spend these next few minutes really talking about advice. I think this is where we're going to hear some real interesting conversation. I try to help people understand that nobody wants advice unless they ask for it. And, you know, I know Alex is on here and we've gone our rounds. I affectionately call it, when I want to give advice to that wonderful young man, mom mode. We've jokingly called it mom mode.
Yeah.
And I'll beg sometimes, can I just have mom mode? And he'll like, yeah, you got 1 minute. And he actually puts me on a timer and says, go. And I got to go, you should do this and you got to go do that and you got to do that. And he go, okay, you're done. Right? Am I right, Alex?
That's correct. Yeah. I always cut it short too. I say a minute, but it's only 52 seconds.
That's awesome.
So I don't think people want advice, even though that's what we're so used to doing. Like Megan, I think you said it earlier. People jump in real quick. I think you should do this. You got to go do this, versus sitting back and listening. And as I teach groups, I teach one group for St. Vincent's Hospital where you cannot give anybody advice the whole time. And man, it is a tough one. And that's when your active listening comes in. How do you just throw in the, interesting. I had a friend call me a couple of weeks ago, and she called and she said, look, I want advice. I'm asking 3 times. Let's go. Don't ask me. And I thought it was hilarious, which meant she read the book. And she said, so don't ask me to ask it 3 times. I want advice. And so what do you guys think of that? To advise, to not advise? What's your thoughts?
I'll jump on that real quick, and I'll use just an example with Megan being on here and Braden and Lainey, my kids, is that, and I'll say this as a coach, and Anthony, you'll tie into this, is that when you're giving advice to your child or giving advice to somebody on a player or somebody that plays for you, like I never had to tell Megan, really. I don't think I may have some, but I don't have to tell them what they did right or what they did wrong, because I know my daughter's personality, and I know that she knows in her heart her goals and where she wants to be, and when she's does things. And our older brother Braden, when he came off the soccer field, I didn't have to give him advice, or I didn't need to go, hey, you could have played better, or you could have done this and all that. That wasn't my day. He already was doing that to himself. And Alex, as a basketball player, you already know that. You're already self-critiquing yourself. And I think a lot of times that parents need to think about that when they have a child, or they're a coach in a coaching situation or whatever, or any kind of situation. Just a lot of times you just can ask the question, I mean, how do you think you did, or whatever. They already know. They're already self-critiquing. So you don't need to just keep giving advice as a coach. You could talk about things, but let them go through the process. And that's just one point that I want to bring up, because I never had to do that. I never do that with Megan or Braden or Megan. They do it enough themselves. We all do it internally ourselves. We're always looking back on how we could have done better. Like yesterday, we had the great event for drug prevention, right? We're critiquing, well, how could we have done it better? But that's just the way it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And Patty, in this part of the book, you had me looking up Parker Palmer.
Oh, I love that. Isn't that a great quote?
Yes. And
I'll read it.
Yeah. And also it went on to say,
can I read the quote real quick?
Yes.
The human soul doesn't want to be advised or fixed or saved. It simply wants to be witnessed exactly as it is. It's one of my favorite quotes.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And then you go on to talk about most people want to vent their thoughts and ideas. They do not want judgments or solutions. They want to be seen, heard, and validated. This chapter kicked my behind, Patty. And it's a great thing though, because I'm actually growing through it. Instead of going through it, I am growing through it.
I love you.
And I can't wait to meet with my kids again, because they're going to see, man, okay. And even with my two daughters, I've gotten to the point, my oldest daughter is, Dad, I want to do this, Dad. And I'm like, you need to do such and such. And here's the way you do that. So now I let her validate her whenever she wants to implement something and doing things in her life. And it's actually helping her to grow. And so, yeah, the second part of excellent communication is to avoid advising unless somebody explicitly asks for help.
Yeah. I mean, I was walking Riley when I first got him down the street, and he's all of 12 weeks old or something. And I was doing treats just as my trainer had trained me to do. And I remember walking down the street and somebody said, you can't do it that way. Excuse me? You can't train a dog that way. And I thought, did I ask you for that? Like, I'm just literally walking down the street, and I thought, oh, I so want to tell you, you can't ask me that, but I didn't.
I'd like to say also, I'm feeling the same, I think, emotions that Anthony's feeling, because I just feel like all of this is just speaking right to me. But the second time I read the chapter, I literally said out loud, I don't want to sound like a smarty pants. It's so natural to want to give advice, but I think most people aren't going to say, I don't really want your advice. They're just going to suffer through it. And I don't want to be like that.
I try to teach people to just thank somebody. Thank you for your care and concern. I'm not sure I asked for advice, or I didn't ask for advice. I actually will say that, because I think people need to also understand that, because it's taken offense, and then there's resentments if somebody doesn't take your advice, but they didn't ask you for it. Right? So that's another reason not to give advice, is people are like, oh my God, that person just didn't do exactly what, did they ask you? Well, no. Well, then don't be upset at them for doing something. They didn't ask you for that advice. Like I said, they probably already had an idea in their head what they wanted to do. So it creates anger and resentments on our part when we give advice and it's not taken. The next question is to ask, was I asked to give advice? No? Okay. Then why are you surprised I didn't take it?
I think also sorry.
No, go ahead, Megan.
From the viewpoint of the speaker, I think sometimes if I am talking to my friends, I feel almost a responsibility that if I'm saying, well, what would you do? I don't actually care what they would do, but it's a way for me to draw them into the conversation, because I can tell that they might not really be listening. And the minute that you give them the chance to speak, then they're 110% into the conversation where they might not have been before. So just reframing the narrative of conversations is really important, that you shouldn't, as a speaker, feel like you need to say, well, if you were in my position, what would you do? Or what's your advice, when really you don't even want their advice. You just want to draw them into what you're saying a little bit more, because you can tell that they aren't really listening to you.
Yeah. Lindy, you look like you were ready to jump.
I got a lot of thoughts going on right now, but I kind of, just for this particular subject, I went two directions. I thought about giving advice to adults or giving advice to children, so parenting and maybe adult relationships or professional relationships. And I always considered two aspects: solicited or unsolicited advice. And generally, when we're dealing with our children, it's unsolicited advice. It's just things we see based on experience and maybe coming from a place of care and concern. So we want to offer our experience. So I always kind of go back to what I used to tell my daughter. she would always want to try riding her bike with no hands. And I'd say, well, when you fall off your bike, it's going to hurt. So I would recommend not doing that, knowing full well she was going to try and attempt to go down the hill with no hands. So I would, it's for me, I realize I'm just preparing myself for whatever's going to happen after that moment, because my intent is for her not to fall off the bike, but it may happen, it may not. But the advice, I try to keep it in context if it's factual, if it's something tangible that she can relate to. So I recommend you don't ride with your hands off the handlebars, because you may fall and it will hurt. And so that's something that she will be able to relate to. She's 12 years old right now, but this is, when she was between 5, 6, 7 years old. So I shifted then to adults when I'm speaking with someone, especially in maybe a colleague, and I have friendships with outside of the professional environment. It's not uncommon for a friend to call up and say, hey, something happened at work today. I really need your advice. That word is almost like a trigger for me, because we are friends. I said, maybe she, in this case, it's a female. Maybe she just needs to vent about something. Maybe she's really not looking for an answer. Maybe she's frustrated, or maybe she's confused, and just talking through it will help her come to a conclusion. So advice doesn't always mean that I have a responsibility in that conversation, especially, right? So I look at it, that person has a particular background and experience, knowledge and education, which could be far different from my experience, knowledge and education. So to try and bring that to the forefront, I would be happy if you're asking me to come help you come up with solutions. Just understand that these are coming from my background, my experience, and things that I have to offer. But I would love to, collaborate and figure out if they would work for you. If they don't, I understand. And, let's go a different direction. So I always try to keep it in context. Anytime I hear the word advice, I don't just assume that, and it's largely based on, personality and things of that nature. But going to the marital side, my husband and I, we always had to look, we've had to learn in our communications together. And Eugene brought it up, marital communication is sometimes most difficult. So we are now at a point where I will tell my husband, I'm having a bad day. I just need to vent. I don't need you to fix or provide any advice to me. Just be clear about what the intention is.
And I think the key point that I also heard on that, Lindy, and thank you very much, is the fact that you asked to qualify. I'm not sure that one of the things is to really say, okay, so are you really asking me for advice, or do you just need to vent? And sometimes I'll listen to the whole thing and let somebody talk, and then say, a lot of times as people talk, they will actually go, oh, wait, I'm good now. I've figured it out. Sometimes people just hearing themselves work something out is really powerful. And so I think that's an important piece, is to always ask somebody, so do you really want advice? My thoughts is you should try to ask 3 times, because somebody, even though they speak about it, might work it out for themselves. And oftentimes when people say, oh no, I just really want you to listen to me, people will be honest on that. So I think it's just your point is well taken, that if somebody asks you for advice, to please kind of go back in there and qualify if that's really what the phone call is about, or the conversation. Alex?
Yeah, I got a question. How do you separate advice and opinion? And like, for instance, I had one last night where I was talking with my girlfriend, and she's going through a professional situation, and I had an opinion on how it should be resolved and what the best way for that to be resolved. And so we had talked about it at, I'm just going to use round numbers, 5 p.m. And I sat there and I listened, and then by 8:30, I was like, to the point where, to me, it's like, if I feel responsible to offer up my opinion on the situation, because if I don't say anything and something were to go sideways, I would feel guilty that, hey, I had an opinion. I didn't say anything. Because I didn't say anything, something else happened and it was a negative outcome. So how do you separate? And I would like to believe that I did it in a polite way, like you're asking, like, hey, you know, I have thoughts. Are you interested in hearing them? If not, I will gladly shut my mouth. But you know, I think those situations come up all the time where you almost are to the point where you're like, I would be remiss if I didn't offer something, because I feel like I'm responsible, having heard your situation, to offer my opinion to try and help you reach a positive outcome. Because if I don't say anything and everything goes sideways, I'm going to feel responsible or a part of that negative solution coming about.
So
How do you
Ellen, I'm
separate
gonna
the difference?
Yeah, I'm going to have Ellen jump in on this. I'll go real quick, and maybe somebody disagrees with me. I've got the two therapists on here as well. So, you know, my answer to that, Alex, is you did a great job of that. I have thoughts. Do you want to hear them? If the answer is like no, you're free and clear. If somebody's, you know, I have some thoughts. Were you venting, or did you want some insight, my insight on this? No, I was just spewing, or I was just venting. Then that person, whoever's on the receiving end of that, they're done. Your responsibility is gone. If it goes sideways, what I try to help people understand, if that situation goes sideways, that's still over on that person. Even though you knew that it's like, hey, that's going to blow up if you do it going with A, you're good, that the whole thing's going to blow up for you. But if that person doesn't ask you, you're absolved of that responsibility. And to be honest, that person, if they ever came back and said, well, why didn't you tell me? The honest truth is, I asked if you wanted my opinion and you didn't. And that needs to be that the person who wants to give advice has to learn how to sit with the fact that, as frustrating as that is, it's not your responsibility. We all, as human beings, have three things that we are 100% in control of. That's our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. Feelings, thoughts, and behaviors. That's all I'm in control of. I can't take care of how somebody responds to me. If I tell somebody no and they totally flip out, that's not on me. Right? So when we give advice to somebody and we ask them like you did, I have an insight. Do you want it? Nope, not at all. Okay, that's fine. And it's also to be a good enough human being that if that situation blew up, not to go, told you so. Right? I mean, that's the worst. Yeah. Then you have to kind of come back in and just help again and listen. Ellen, go ahead, jump in here. I'd love to hear what you have to say on that.
No, I mean, you were right on with that whole coming back and being like, you know, I could have told you that was going to happen, or I had an opinion on that and you didn't want to hear it. Sometimes, you know, the way you say that could really be creating more issues in that relationship. So you have to be really careful with that. But I agree completely though, just, hey, I have a thought about this. I'd be happy to share it with you. You don't have to take it, you know, just my thought. I want to share, you know, and sometimes as a spouse, you're like, yeah, sure, share. I want to hear. And then other times you're like, no, please just sit, listen, don't talk, don't give me advice. And you just really have to know the difference and be willing to speak up for yourself, which can be a challenge.
And I also think too, Alex, it's a good point. People want to just work things out themselves. Like you said, it was between 5 and 8. Maybe by 8 o'clock, you were just done with the whole thing. But your partner was not. And sometimes we have to just be able to sit with the fact of, oh God, do I have to hear this one more time? Yep, I do. And that's part of, right, Amy? Amy's down there laughing. So Amy, chime into this one. But yeah, sometimes we just have to go, oh, I've heard this story 20 times. Okay, it looks like it's going to be 21. And take that, because that person is trying to work it out the best they can. And the best way any of us work out a problem is by talking about it until it has no more air. I tell people that all the time. Tell your story till it has no more air. When it has no more air, you're no longer affected by that. And sometimes we just have to be in our heads and let that person be talking and just politely go, yeah, interesting. That's all that person needs. If they haven't told you, yeah, I really want your opinions. Somebody else chime in here.
Yeah, I'll say
Patty, real
one thing.
quick. Just real quick on what you said there, that you said, people you learn from mistakes, and sometimes as hard as they are and as painful they are, we actually have to go through them and let people experience them in order to learn.
And we don't like that. If we know somebody's
No.
going to fail, if we know
Yes.
my daughter's going to fall off that bike, but I've told her, hey, not a good idea, to sit back as a parent and go, this is going to be a major fail, but that's the best thing this kid's going to learn.
Yep. Exactly.
We can
It
tell
catches
them
all the time.
100 times, don't touch that hot stove. By God, they have to touch the hot stove and learn. And
My mom did that.
Yeah, I hate to see it, but it happens.
I learned, don't touch that hot stove. Listen to your parents.
Yeah.
Alex, I'm curious, Matt, we're going to go to you, but Alex, I'm curious to hear this. What are your thoughts on what Amy or what Ellen and I have said so far? And then Matt's going to jump in here too.
Yeah, I think all of that makes sense. And I think there is a difference. We talk about all these different things, but how you goes back to something that you've said since I was 0. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. And, you can deliver the exact same message in 100 different ways using different words. And, the delivery of what you're trying to get across matters more probably than the actual message that's in there. And yeah, I mean, I understand that, and I try to put myself in the other side of the situation. And there are times when you do want to hear what other people would do if they were in your situation, and there's other times where I'm gonna ride my bike without my hands, and I'm gonna touch the stove, and I'm gonna do whatever, and it doesn't matter what you or anybody else has to say about it. And so I think, to Ellen's point, like, it's just understanding and receiving the cues or listening to the words that are saying, like, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say, or understanding that they may truly be interested in what you have to say. And so listening and understanding and reading those cues is important.
Matt.
Yeah, no, I'll just say for anybody in a relationship, again, this is Alex, you hit the nail on the head. And I think everybody on this, panel can go through it, no matter how, where we're at in our lives, is that being able to listen and being able to know when to respond and how to respond is just so key. It took me so long to figure out, and in my marriage and all that, it's that sometimes my wife, Megan's mom, she just wants to talk and she just wants me to listen. And so guess what my responsibility is? It's to listen, and in a relationship, you have to, and that's I think, we're so prone to, just to spring it into action. And when we spring into action and start offering our advice too soon, it can shut somebody down when they're not ready to be shut down. They still want to talk. So that great point that you made, Alex. So
yeah, Matt, you bring up a good point, and we'll touch on that. And I know we're getting right down to the hour, but that great piece of when you're talking to a spouse or partner or friend or a colleague, I don't care who it is, the active listening part is to be able, can you either tell that person you understand the emotion that's being said, or can you actually hear words? So sometimes just being able to say, so, I heard you say that the sky is blue and we're going to sail off in the sunset together. Is that what you said? No, I was talking about our finances. Oh, okay. Can you repeat that? I must not have heard what you were saying, right? So it's being able to hear that. The other point is to make sure, if you're talking about an emotion, if I were to pop over to Ellen and say, Ellen, you look like you're really upset today. Ellen has the ability to be able to say, oh, wow, well, I don't know what my face is saying, but no, I'm having a great day. Or no, I'm not upset. I'm actually really ticked off. Human beings, and this isn't important for anybody who's listening, human beings will not allow somebody to tell us how we feel. We will correct them. You look so happy today. Oh, really? I'm having the worst day ever. We just will, that's our automatic response. So even if you guess wrong, and I tell people to do this all the time, wow, it seems like you're really upset today. I know you shouldn't start with you. But I see that there's some, things are not going well. I know where everybody's on the panels going, oh yeah, you blew that. I'm human. But one of the things is when you guess an emotion, the other human being will tell you exactly how they feel. I'm overwhelmed, I'm happy, I'm excited. And that's an important piece to remember how to utilize too, as we're talking with people in our lives.
Yeah, well, we're right at the
Yes,
hour.
we are.
We are. And I'll tell you a couple of things and then I'll throw it back to you. But again, in getting my counseling degree, I read this book and it talks about communication is like a dance. And the whole book is written on, I can't remember the name of it, but it talks about it being the 2-step tango. And it was a great book, a little educational, but so it's not like you want to go read it on a Saturday afternoon. But when you're talking about communication, it's like the 2-step tango. And the 2-step tango is a beautiful dance when you're watching it. But when the 2-step tango gets out of step, right? It's not a pretty sight. It's not a pretty sight until you get back in sync and you get back in step, and then it's beautiful again. So, in communication, it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be great, but it's important just to open up and communicate. Another thing I love is, Lindy, what you said about, the tagline of Convene Community is real life, real people, real experience. A lot of time, that's how we're going to give our advice. It's based off our real experience, right? It's based off my experience. When I'm talking to anybody, you're going to say, hey, Lindy, you're in this situation, how would you handle it? And then we're going to talk about it, right? And then I'm going to give you my opinion. So it's just how you do this. So, but great. This chapter was incredible, Patty. And I'll throw it back to you, unless anybody has anything real quick that they want to close out and say before we get to Patty to close it out. And then we'll let her close it out.
Yeah, I'm going to throw it out to the group. If you have one, just a short little thing, I always end my own sessions this way. What's your number one takeaway from this book or this discussion today? Anybody?
I want to say one thing that made me think of this. My dad used to always say, probably because I talk too much, Judy, remember, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good advice from my long lost dad. Love him.
Love that.
But Patty, I'm really excited to read the book, and so I'll be sure to catch up. But I think, and I can't remember who highlighted the word, but shame was highlighted a little bit ago, and especially as parent in the parenting role, that is something I want to be mindful of and not project that. So that's something that I'll take away for myself as well.
Love that. Yeah.
I think for me, it's just an awareness of the you. I'm kind of a professional advice giver.
Yes.
So that's just very interesting because I don't think of myself as someone that offers advice, but that's what I do for a living. It is. So I'm asked to, but I like to think I'm a good listener. So but using the you statements, that's where I can focus. So thank you, Patty. And so nice to meet you, Alex.
Nice to meet you virtually as well. Thank you for your help a little while ago.
Yeah, I'll be follow up offline. I hope something developed, but let's have that conversation separately. I've got to run. I've got a call. I'm 5 minutes late for.
Bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Anyone else real quick? Then
I
we'll
think
close.
for me, it's
Go ahead.
definitely the active listening, as I said, with my friends, and not jumping to a place where I want to give them advice because I think my opinion is right. But that's just the part of the chapter that resonated most with me.
Yeah, cool. Well, I can't thank you enough. I mean, a couple people had to jump off, and that's absolutely fine. I appreciate you jumping in there. Hopefully, when this shows up either on the Convene page or my page, please share this. I think that there are people that always tune back in. To me, it's not about the book. It's about this conversation that we've had today. It's about spreading the word, helping somebody out there that might not have read the book, but I should think they'll be able to pick up tips here. And I think it's so perfect timing for this place where we are in our lives as well. So thank you all for joining me today. Look forward to it. If you guys can join back up on next Friday, we got chapter 4. Hard to believe how quickly this is going. Matt, thank you again for hosting us this day.
Absolutely. And if you don't have Patty Muller's book, make sure to order it. It's on Amazon. You can order it. There it is right there. And I'll tell you this, I know people that ordered it based off of this show. Hold on. Everybody's holding the book. I had to move it yesterday for the podcast. Sorry, but people have moved it. Up in the Michigan been watching today. So just great. You're affecting people all over. And we appreciate you, Patty. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
So
Matt.
everybody have a good day. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next Friday.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.